It's time for the Sin Bin. 5 minutes for fighting.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome aboard to our second installment of the Sin Bin, our Saturday show where we just shoot nonsense about topics that we disagree with. I am Alex from the Pucking Around podcast. Aside from me is Cam. As usual, just going to be shooting the shit about a particular topic that we have a disagreement with. And we're going to get right into it this week. This week's topic is buyers versus sellers. So at the end of the day, this topic is just going to be describing what we believe is a buyer, what we believe is a seller, and what that in-between leverage is if it's just a plain old hockey trade. Me and Cam kind of have a little bit of disagreements about specifically what it installs, including an aspect on my team right now. So I'm going to get right into this. I believe when you look at the term as a buyer, you're looking at someone who is flat out making a legitimate all-in push, selling off future assets for a team that is ready to win here and now. You're picking up players that you think are going to help you for the short term, 1, 2, maybe 3 years down the line. You're not worried about what assets that you're going to be giving up, whether it be in your prospect pool, whether it be in your draft class, whole 9 yards in that aspect. A seller is someone who's pretty much doing flip-flops, selling off pieces, whether it be major cornerstone pieces or whether it be guys who are on expiring contracts who are middle to bottom 6 guys or second or third pairing D-men or even a goalie or something like that to pick up draft capital, pick up some future prospects that could help you 2, 3, 4 years down the line to help establish a future core for your organization. And then a flat-out hockey trade is pretty self-explanatory when you're making a move where you potentially are bolstering up weakness by giving up something within the organization that's a strength. So usually it just consists of a player per player within 2 teams that are currently have guys on their active roster at the moment. So that is my definition. Cam, what would yours be?
For buyer and seller, I think it's the same thing. I think those are pretty cut and dry definitions. But I think for the hockey trade piece, I think I don't know if I heard you, but you didn't clearly mention that it's a mutually beneficial thing for both of those teams. I have a player, you have a player. They're not working out for what we need them to be, but they'll work out for you. Why don't we just swap them? And if necessary, maybe one team, depending on the talent level, might need to throw in an additional thing, but it's not something that would necessarily be a buying situation. So that typically involves depth guys more often than not. Or sometimes we've seen hockey trades that involves star players. That happens. But GMs ever since Taylor Hall getting traded for pennies on the dollar.
Adam Larson.
Yeah, for Adam Larson, I think GMs are definitely a little bit more wary about that, so they stick with some projections there.
Yeah.
I guess
I can tend to agree with that. What my take mainly on it was, it's just usually it's a hockey trade within the organization where if you have a weakness within the roster and you're willing to give up a strength, it's beneficial, like you stated, to one team for helping out a weakness of another. So, for example, say one team's missing a second line left winger, and hey, I got 2 or 3 guys who can fill that role. Oh, we need a second pairing right-handed shot defenseman. Oh, you got 2 or 3 guys that can fill that role. Let's make work something out. That's my intuition of what I'd consider as a hockey trade versus buyers versus sellers.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the only time during this episode where Alex and I agree upon something.
Because shit's about to hit the floor. Because one thing we had a major disagreement about is what my particular team is doing.
Yeah, you're not just yours, Alex, though, but typically, when should a team be a buyer? When should a team be a seller? Because it seems like you're on the opposite end of me on that. Or when should a team just make good hockey trades while not damaging the future of or the intended plan, like you said with your example with the Flyers?
So here's my aspect on this. I think you should be committed to a buyer when you feel like your team, the here and now, is ready to make a true Stanley Cup push. If you're in like a bubble playoff spot and you have a team that's overachieving, or you have some talent, but you look at the roster and you say, okay, I like this team. They're playing hard. They work hard every night, but top to bottom, if I'm going to see this team go through the wear and tear grind of the playoffs night in and night out against the talent level that I'll be playing continuously throughout a playoff run like that, I believe that I'm willing to make that short-term sacrifice of being a quote-unquote buyer and further gain assets for my future and my team's development than go on the fritz of saying, oh, we're in a decent spot right now. Let's go for it. We may not have the star power, but we're in a playoff spot. Let's push for it. Let's see what we got. Me personally, I think that's where you put the fine line of being a buyer versus a seller. I would not buy in an instance if you look at your team top to bottom and say, this team can compete year in and year out for a cup for at least the next 4 to 5 years while giving up those assets. That's where, unless if you're at the tail end of that run and you're saying, we're hitting a massive rebuild anyway, that's when I say, okay, let's see what that fine line is. I plan on selling if I don't believe my team is ready to make that consistent year in and year in push of being a cup contender. Your turn.
Yeah, I think it could depend on where you are in the standings and how well your team has been performing that year. Because if you genuinely think the team is actually, you can say it's overachieving. I don't know. The parity of the league is really good. So
I want to disagree with that.
Okay, of course you will.
But
I'm not done talking. I request my time back, Senator.
Speak.
Thank you. You'll get your turn again. Don't worry. No, I think the parity of the league is good. I think there's a lot of competition. I mean, just look at this year. A lot of teams that you didn't anticipate to actually have, strong years are having strong years. Look at Vancouver. Look at where they are. The Jets. The Jets are having a strong year. Not many people had those two teams at the top. The Bruins are having another amazing year. No one anticipated that. The Flyers are having a good year. No one anticipated that. A lot of these teams are just having good years that weren't expected. So I don't think that necessarily is going to make them buyers. I think that will make them that in between that we talked about with, doing hockey trades to make them competitive and see, what it's like in the playoffs. I don't think that'll make if the team is just not built to win right now, I'm going to say built to win because all of it, or if not most of it, is just getting into the playoffs. Anything can happen in the playoffs. We saw that last year. We saw that in 2021 when Montreal went to the cup final against Tampa Bay in the bubble. Anything can happen. To me, it's if you can get into the playoffs, anything can happen. You don't need to ruin your plan. Like I know Danny Briere has this rebuild plan in place, and it's a good plan, I think, to have. But I think there are also ways that he can still improve the team without impeding that plan that he has.
So
just
here
need to be.
Here's my thing on that. You mentioned that 2021 Montreal team. I feel like that team was kind of an anomaly because that year was such a weird year. You're playing through your division. You're only playing a handful of teams. It's not really quite the same. There are teams that can make that type of run, but look at what ended up happening to Montreal, who ended up going in a multi-year rebuild after that. You look at some of these teams like this, where I look at a Philly or even a Detroit, their plan, well, at least in Philadelphia's aspect of things, their plan from the get-go was we're going to do this the right way. We're not going to take shortcuts. We're not going to build. I mean, we're not going to start trying to nick away some of our prospects in terms of making an all-in push this year. Now, you mentioned that middle ground. I'm not saying that the Philadelphia Flyers in this example are going to be full-blown sellers this year. They're not going to sell like Joel Farabee or Owen Tippett or anything.
Well, let's be honest. Let's be honest with everyone that's watching. That is exactly what you said on the podcast. You expected them to say, "All right, I'm going to screenshot the Farging Facebook group chat."
Go right ahead.
It's going to say, "See, now you're making my cough aggregate."
My freaking head, Cam. You are selling off your guys who will not be here for the long haul. Scott
You use the term, they're going to be sellers.
Yeah, they're going to be partial sellers. Yes, they are going to be sellers.
I think they're going to be the in-between. I think they're going to be the in-between. Based on the definition that we used, I don't think they are going to be the definition of a seller. I
They're
don't want
not going to be that in between because they have a lot of guys that they can bring up from the minors right now that are pretty much ready that can fill those slots. Scott Lawton is one guy I've used as an example that is
What about your goaltender?
What about our goal? That is the one spot I'd say maybe you make a push for a backup spot.
What about a top 6 center?
I said a 1C in the top 6 center of the okay, fine, 2 spots. But that listen, how often does a 1C land in your lap? I stated that from the beginning in our argument. I stated that if a 1C or a backup goalie,
I'd even say a 2C.
No, they're not going to make a big push for a 2C. They
it doesn't
have
need
Sean
to be a
Couturier
big push.
Can
You
fill
can
that instantly. Sean Couturier, even
Sean
more
Couturier can play the first line center if need be.
No, Sean
But you
Couturier
could
is
get a decent 2C
not
on
a
the
1C
cheap.
at this stage of his career, especially missing 2 years off of major back surgery at 31. Sean Couturier is a great number 2 center. Sure, I will willingly say that. But unless of a guy like Trevor Zegras lands in their lap, which is unlikely, I know I posted what I did in our group chat, but realistically, I do not believe they will end up with a guy like that unless if they trade off a few first. If you get a young 1C, that's different. But the realistic aspect of things is, unless if something like that lands in your lap, you're going to be more in that seller lane than that in between, because there's more guys on your team that you're most likely going to be trying to get rid of. Scott Lawton, now that Ryan Poehling has been signed for the next 2 years after this year, at 24 years old, he has pretty much become almost borderline expendable at bare minimum the end of the year.
Here's where I'll agree with you. You definitely have 1-year players that you can certainly get rid of. Mark Stahl's gone.
He's
gone.
I would be happy they sold Mark Stahl for a bag of Cheetos at this point.
Sean Walker gone because these are easily movable contracts.
There's 3 guys right there. Rasmus Ristolainen now is being brought up in trade talks. He has term. He's a right-hand big guy defenseman.
He makes way too much money over the next 4 years. $5.5 million.
I agree with that. He is overpaid. However, the Flyers have stated that they will eat a little bit of that contract as long as they get a good return as a thank you for that. They're willing to maybe make that as a $3.5 million.
It's not going to be much because right now Kevin Hayes is on the books for the next 3 years and retained salary.
Yes, he does. But Oscar Lindblom's off the books after this year, and Tony Giangelo's off the books next year. So you only have one eaten up roster spot for retained salary after that. So
no, that's buyout history.
Well, regardless, you can have 3. You only have 1 guy in the trades aspect of this right now. 2 via buyouts. You can have 3 via trade. So you still have 2.
I still think you can get rid of like Mark Stahl and someone like
Mark Stahl's get launched into the sun no matter what.
But that's fine. You can still trade 2. You can make a hockey trade and not be considered a seller. You can trade, let's just say, Sean Walker and Mark Stahl and get like me, because now you're down to 6 depth defensemen, right? So you would want a 7th. You could get a decent 7th D in return.
No, they have guys in the minors that they can bring up. Ronnie Attard and Emil Adrane are both almost ready. You can bring one of those guys
almost.
Up. Honestly, Emil Adrane made the roster and then got sent down. So I think he's pretty much ready. But if you want to, alternate 7 defensemen and you can alternate him and Zamula or Sealer or something like that, you have the leverage to do that. And then if you trade a guy like Scott Lawton, this team's got 5 centers on their roster right now. You can move a guy like that and then bring up like Bobby Brink or something like that.
I never said that you couldn't, but I think there's a possibility you sell 2 players, and I don't like saying that.
More than they buy.
You're going to trade 2 players, but you're going to still find a way to get it mutually beneficial. I don't think you're going to sell in our conventional sense of the word sell. I don't think you're selling to get prospects or picks. I don't think you're doing that. You have 2 first-round picks this year.
The Flyers
have 2 second-round picks this year.
Because the Flyers, outside of Matvei Michkov, do not have a lot of A-quality prospects right now. They have a lot of that B tier. Oliver Bonk looks like it could be a steal of a pick. He looks like a potential B-plus number 2 future.
You have a decent roster, though.
They do, but there's only a few handful of guys that are going to be here when this team is truly a cup contender again. Joel Farabee, Owen Tippett, hopefully Travis Konechny. He still has to get extended, so we'll see on that. Jamie Drysdale, probably Cam York. There's probably about 6 or 7 guys that are realistically may or likely going to be here from this current
I
roster when they're truly a cup contender.
I'm just looking at all your cap, all your stuff, and I'm just like, next year you're gonna have $8 million in cap. The year after that, you'll have $41 million in cap.
They'll have
So
that's why, and
you're
that's why I
working
truly
towards.
believe they're going to be sellers at least this offseason. I mean, this deadline and offseason, and maybe a little bit of next. I
I'd
think that
believe it.
26 line is where it is.
I believe it more heavier on next season, just with the way some of these contracts are lined up.
I think it's probably 2 years from now because Mitchkoff will be a year out. Let's look at it this way. You don't necessarily have to use all these picks. I think realistically, they're going to end up with a third first round pick down the line, whether it's for Scott Lawton, whether it's for Sean Walker, whether it's for Rasmus Ristolainen. I do think they'll probably add another second too. You then have 3 firsts and maybe 3 seconds to work with in this year's draft. You can package that to get a future top 6, maybe even first line guy for a team that's ready to hit a potential reset or rebuild like an Ottawa or a Buffalo or an Arizona or something like that. Maybe not Arizona because they're actually getting close, but an Ottawa, a Buffalo, a Calgary, something like that. You have the assets to potentially make a move to get maybe a young top 6 guy with all these draft picks you have. That's what it really comes down to. The Flyers don't necessarily have to use all these picks. This is where building these assets and building these prospects could help them in the long haul when they have a guy like that.
I understand how building a team works. I'm just not convinced that the Flyers are going to be sellers at the deadline.
I think they're going to be more in the line of sellers versus that middle line. Maybe they're not going to be full-blown fire sale. There's no question.
No, they're not. No, they're not selling off the crap. I think they're going to make hockey trades. That they're not going to sell. They're going to make hockey trades.
But where do these guys fit in the roster when they have so much young players that are ready?
You're not going to just be able to do 1-for-1s. It might be a 2-for-1. Like that's part of a hockey trade, though. That doesn't make it
like I said, if it lands you a guy like a Trevor Zegras somehow, that's one thing. That's a 1 seed. That's an exception.
I'll put it this way.
I'm not saying they're going to get him.
You're in prime position to be in the playoffs, and I just don't think that it's wise.
The guys that I mentioned should not be the reason they make.
No, but it's part of the piece. Like if you start selling people off and people start getting injured, now those veteran guys that you sold are no longer present on the team. You now no longer have a veteran presence. You need to rely on rookies, and sometimes rookies make mistakes. They don't have the veteran leadership to lead them.
That's the learning curve I'm willing to take.
Reclaiming my time.
You had your time. Go ahead.
But I just think they'll make better hockey trades. You're definitely getting a goaltender, whether that's Jake Allen or even I think Marc-Andre Fleury might be a hot topic for you guys.
I don't think they got the cap to get him. There's a goalie in San Jose I was reading about it. Not Blackwood. There's another guy there. I'm blanking on his name right now.
They very well could, because Marc-Andre Fleury, I think, makes about the same as Jake Allen, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know what Fleury's contract is off the top of my head. I might be mistaken on that.
It's almost $4 million. Almost. Okay. I think it's around like 3
if they're going to get a backup goalie, that's maybe the only aspect of quote unquote buying I do due to the Carter Hart situation. And that came out of nowhere. But unless if Cal Pedersen makes me prove myself wrong, which I'm not very confident in, that's probably the only aspect of buying I could see them doing. Jake Allen would be a good guy. He got 2 years and less than $4 million. That's a guy that you can at least work.
Yeah, but
Alexei Kolosov is ready.
Yeah, but Marc-Andre Fleury is a 1-year rental, so that would work actually better in the case for the Flyers.
Like I said,
still have.
I'm not sure what is.
I'm going to be bold and I'm going to talk about it because you don't know what the hell's going on with Carter Hart. So
he's not going to ever come back here again. There's no doubt in my mind. He will never play here again. His contract's up this year anyway. By the time the legalities end up going through, it's not supposed to till April.
I'll tell you right now, they're going to qualify him as an RFA. They will qualify him.
They already got him as a non-roster. If they qualify him, no one's going to take him. He's never going to play here again.
They're not. But if they don't qualify him, my point being is let's just say everything comes back and he's okay.
That would take at least 2 years.
If he's still not qualified, that opens the gate for anyone can interact with him.
If they want to, I don't know how that would particularly work in this instance.
If you qualify
but I don't know how that works with non-roster compliance because he's currently on the non-roster right now, and his contract's
he's still under the CBA.
And it doesn't that only go to a certain age?
The RFAs, yes.
So I think he's 25 right now. I think that only qualifies till 26. So this is going to probably take at
Yep.
least 2 years.
Yep.
26.
But ultimately,
whatever.
I think you'd be hard pressed to basically say to the guys in the locker room, "Hey, we didn't improve this team at all in some capacity. We're third place in the division." And then I just think you, as the GM, I would want, if I'm a player on your team, I would want an explanation as to why. I'm like, "Hey, we're in a playoff spot. All we need to do is make it, and maybe some magic happens. Why didn't you either improve on a weakness, make something better in some capacity?" I'd be pissed off because you're basically saying upper management is coming down and saying, like, we don't believe in the way this team is currently built to do a damn thing, even though you're third place.
There's a simple reason of that. Danny even informed every player on that roster in the year this is going to be a process. They know that. They're not stupid. This is a team. And like I said, they have John Tortorella as a head coach. He's going to light a fire up their ass no matter what. If losing a guy like a Sean
That
Walker
doesn't
or
make
Scott Lawton is what's going to demoralize this team to making or missing the playoffs, they don't deserve to.
No, it's not. You're saying, and this is the part that I don't think you're getting. You're using these names, and I'm like, it's not about losing them. It's about what you're getting in return.
I
It has
understand that.
nothing to do with like, okay, these guys are not performing. Clearly, they're going to get moved. You know what I mean? Something is going to happen to these guys. But if I'm a person in the locker, I'm like, fine. If you're going to move these guys that I've had some camaraderie with, I'm looking at the standings. I'm looking at our own believability. I would want management to make a move that it doesn't have to be something insane, but it would need to be something that keeps us in that competitive mindset. And if they don't, and if they don't at least do that, then my morale goes down. Even if I have to wait 5 years, especially if you're Sean Couturier, who's 31, how much longer are you going to make that guy wait?
Final point on that. Here's the issue with that. This team has an abundance of depth already. They don't need to. Morale isn't going to kill this. I mean, trading off a guy or two, I get what you're saying about the morale of the team. That, they don't believe in us because they didn't get player X or player Y or try to truly improve in this roster. But here's the thing. This team has an abundance of depth. The only true spots of improvement this team really needs right now is either a backup goalie, which is the one thing I'd said that I would be interested in going to get because I don't believe in Cal Pedersen, or some high-end talent, which is the only way that happens if one of those fall in your lap, which is very unlikely at the trade deadline, unless if, like I said, the only guy you could see that has a slim chance of being moved that fits the criteria of what this team needs right now for the 1C aspect of thing is Trevor Zegras. And I'm not fully confident he ends up getting moved. Maybe. That's probably the only guy I could truly see. If someone else that I don't expect within that age range ends up getting moved, that's one thing.
Are you going to be willing to pay that price for Trevor Zegras?
Yes, I'd pay 2 firsts in a heartbeat for Trevor Zegras. 100%.
It might be more.
I'd pay 2 firsts in a prospect in a heartbeat. No question.
Yep. I think, he might want 2 firsts, a prospect.
I would do 2 firsts and Bobby Brink. Send them all over. No question. I'd give him the Florida first and our first next year for him. No doubt.
They might want, if you're getting Zegras, they might want, but then again, I'm not going to get into that. But ultimately, no, I think
that's a discussion for another day.
I've stated my points. I don't think they're going to be, I think they're going to make hockey trades. I don't think they're going to be more
sellers than hockey trades at this point. But we're running a little late, guys. I hope you enjoyed our little back and forth bickering this week. Thank you for joining into the Sin Bin. Appreciate you coming in. As usual, please give us a follow on our YouTube channel at PAP Media 24 or follow us on Spotify.
Don't forget to let us know your thoughts in the comments section. We do read those. You can also reach out to us at puckingaroundpodcast@gmail.com if there's actually a hot topic that you think Alex and I can discuss. As much as we love to argue with each other, we also like to listen to you guys. So if you think there's something controversial that we could fight about, we'll fight about it. Absolutely. Please give us some new ideas. We're an open book. We plan on doing this most likely next week again too. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along. I appreciate it. Again, YouTube, PAP Media 24, Spotify, The Pucking Around Podcast, at the Pucking Around Podcast @gmail.com. Hit us up in the comments section. For each like, follow, and subscribe, Alex gets 1 flick to the nose. And for every today, Junior. All right, let's go. Let's take this out of this. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. It's morning. Close enough.